Welcome back to Remembrance in Their Own Words, a limited series from the CDA Institute, Canada's premier defense and security think tank. I'm David Boris, and this is the fourth installment of the series. With Remembrance Day less than a week away, we take this moment to honor the dedication and sacrifice of veterans across Canada. In today's evolving defense landscape, it's important to take time to reflect on the services of those who came before, support those who continue to serve, and commit to working for peace and unity. Join us as our guests share stories, insights, and perspectives that highlight the courage and commitment of the Canadian Armed Forces. Today on the podcast, we're excited to be joined by Vice Admiral Duncan Dusty Miller, CMM, MSc, Commander Retired. Vice Admiral Miller served 38 years in the Royal Canadian Navy with a distinguished career that included commanding 2 ships, leading the Canadian Naval Task Group during the Persian Gulf War, and serving as NATO's Deputy Supreme Allied Commander Atlantic. He was also the NATO HQ commander overseeing AWACS surveillance of North America after 9/11. In addition to his military leadership, Vice Admiral Miller is deeply involved in supporting veterans, including roles with the Commissionaires and the Canadian Naval Memorial Trust. He's also an active member of several musical groups, including the Phoenix Community Choir and Nova Voce. A strong supporter of both the Navy and Air Force, he continues to promote Canada's defense community and the important work being done to keep our country secure. Dusty, could you briefly tell us where and in what capacity you served in the Canadian Forces?
Sure. I had 38 years in the Navy, so giving you a quick sojourn is going to be difficult. However, I previously told you I joined the Navy after first year university at Bishop's University. I grew up in Montreal, and I was the only Navy in the university, so I trained with the Army, which was a kind of exciting thing in any event. I rode in a tank before I saw a ship. But I was posted to Halifax in 1968 and joined my first ship, and I spent the next 10 years in 2 ships, Marguerite and Skeena. Skeena was a French language ship because I spoke French, and that was very useful later on in my career. And I passed all the command exams. There's 14 exams that you have to write and a 2-hour board, and I got my command papers really quickly, which was terrific. And I got posted to Esquimalt in British Columbia as the commanding officer of HMCS Cowichan, which was a minesweeper that trained junior officers. And after Cowichan, they sent me to Staff College in London, which was another boon. Just loved that particular posting, fell in love with the whole thing. And on return, I was posted to as an executive officer for the Maritime Forces Commander, the Admiral on the West Coast. And then I went to HMCS Gatineau as executive officer, and we took a Pacific deployment from San Diego to Australia to Guam to Hong Kong. I thought, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And after my executive time, I was sent to Ottawa to the Directorate of Maritime Force Development, which I said, what the heck is that? Anyway, it turned out to be the organization in Ottawa that was determining the next class of ships for the Navy. And so I held several multi-branch exercises to choose the Canadian Patrol Frigate as the next ship in the Navy. And after having done that, I went to be the staff officer for the Chief of Defense Staff. I don't know why that happened, but it seemed like, okay, that was an excellent posting as well. And I didn't spend too long there before I was promoted to commander and took command of HMCS Nipigon, which is a helicopter destroyer escort. And our first trip was to take the Lieutenant Governor of Newfoundland around Newfoundland. And that went so well, they said, Dusty, get over to Gaspé and pick up the Lieutenant Governor of Quebec and take him to some of his ports, which I did. And when we got to Baie-Comeau, the Prime Minister visited, and I'll never forget when he walked up to inspect the guard, he said, so what do you think of the new of us bringing back the old uniforms. And I said, if you weren't standing there, I'd give you a big hug and a kiss. And all you was Prime Minister Mulroney, who just laughed away. And the whole ship's company said, what did you say to the Prime Minister? Anyway, he never forgot me, which came in handy later. After Nipigon, I went to the Canadian Forces Maritime Warfare Center, which trained the fleet in how to win a war. And that also became handy because after 3 years, I was posted as the 1st Squadron Commander in Halifax, 1st Destroyer Squadron Escort Commander. Within 2 weeks, all of a sudden, we're off to the Gulf War in the Persian Gulf. And that we left in August of 1990, and I spent 8 months aboard HMCS Athabascan as the commander of the task group of the 3 Navy ships that went to war in the Persian Gulf. And during the wartime period, I was given the job as the combat logistic force commander for all of the allies that were there, which meant scheduling all the fuelings from Protector, escorting all the ships that came into the Gulf with Terra Nova, sailing through a minefield to save USS Princeton, which had been damaged off Kuwait, and on it goes. I've got a couple of highlights that I can talk about afterwards as well. And after that job, I came home and my family wasn't too happy because they posted me as Director of Naval Requirements in Ottawa, which for the Navy, that made sense. But as a family, that didn't make a whole bunch of sense. I'd been away for 8 months. Never mind. They all agreed to accompany me, and I had 3 children at the time, and it all worked out. So that was pretty interesting to develop the naval requirements, and it wasn't long before I was promoted to Commodore and posted as the first naval officer into the Privy Council office as the Prime Minister's defense advisor. Wow. Guess who the Prime Minister was? Mr. Mulroney. So he knew me already, which was a blessing in disguise, I guess. I spent 3 years in the Privy Council office and worked for 3 prime ministers, so Kim Campbell and Jean Chrétien at the end. Monsieur Chrétien didn't want to hear about why he should not cancel the helicopter program, so I said, well, I'd like to leave. Mm-hmm. And I did. I went back to the minister's office of Director General Policy for the Canadian Forces. Didn't spend long there before I was posted to Commander Defense Liaison Staff in London, England, which was a terrific posting, and my wife says that was her reward after all that time in a war and at sea. And everyone said, well, that's probably the end of your career. Only it wasn't. I got the call to be told I was being promoted and put in as the commander of Maritime Forces Atlantic, and the Joint Forces Atlantic in Halifax. So back to Halifax I come. Had a great time as the commander of Maritime Forces Atlantic. Some highlights there: the Swiss Air disaster. I was the overall operational commander for the recovery of the aircraft and oversaw the search and rescue and recovery operation, which was pretty tense. And I met with the families every day, which to tell them what we were doing, and if they had any questions, I would answer anything. So that was a highlight of a sad highlight, I guess, in Maritime Forces Atlantic. And I was going to retire because my wife wanted to run a bed and breakfast, but they said, well, we know you don't want to come back to Ottawa, which is what I didn't want to do. Would you go to Norfolk, Virginia? And my wife said, yeah, sure. Why don't we go to Norfolk? We loved our time in London and with the international community. So my final posting was in Norfolk, Virginia as the Chief of Staff to the Supreme Allied Commander Atlantic. And that was posted as a U.S. Army general. And he was taken away for the second war in the Gulf. And so I became the Deputy Supreme Allied Commander Atlantic while he was away, which for a Canadian, what a great opportunity, just unbelievable. And I had a couple of highlights there that I can talk about later on. So I retired in 2003. So there's a brief whip through my career.
Yes.
And when I retired, they asked me to be the honorary colonel of 406 Squadron because one of my specialties was as an air controller, and I love flying, and I've flown in just about everything, including jets. I did the honorary colonel's job for 8 years. So I was sort of back in the Canadian Forces in that capacity. And that should probably be the end of it. I finally retired, and my wife and I did run a bed and breakfast for 8 years.
Oh, good for you. I mean, that's an incredible story. It's one of those stories of join the military, see the world, really go everywhere you can. And by the way, I just love the state of Virginia. I actually did University at Virginia Tech for a while, and I was in Norfolk. So it's a great state, great part of the United States. I'm always embarrassed to ask this next question because you've just listed this massive resume and all of these experiences. So I'm gonna give you the hard one, which is, could you share one or two memorable moments from your time in the CAF? And I know this will be difficult because it sounds like there's so many.
Yes, there are so many, but certainly I would highlight the Gulf War and being given the opportunity to command the Combat Logistic Force, which ended up as 60 ships, if you can imagine, in the middle of the Persian Gulf, 60 ships coordinating their supply of fuel and food and ammunition, and providing the defense for the United States carriers in the middle of the Persian Gulf. That was my job. That was our job as a task group, to protect the U.S. carriers and the cruisers and missile ships that were going to be firing into Iraq to extricate the Iraqis from Kuwait.
Mm-hmm.
And the highlights of that, Athabaskan, I was called by the U.S. Admiral in charge of the carriers and said, we've got USS Princeton just off Kuwait City, has been damaged by a mine. The stern is about to fall off. We need a ship to escort that ship out of the minefield. We need a tug to go astern of this ship. And he said that ship has to be well prepared, has to have a helicopter, has to have a task group commander, and that's your ship. So can you do it? And I talked to the ship's captain, and in fact, we called Ottawa because we had some limits on the geographic placement of the ships in the Gulf. We weren't allowed to go north of a certain line, and off Kuwait City was north of that line. So we had to, I called the Chief of Defense Staff, who called the Prime Minister, who said, yep, go ahead. And so Athabaskan, and that all came within about 4 hours, which was remarkable to get that kind of go ahead in that particular time. Meanwhile, we were on our way anyway. But I think sailing through a mined area presents another psychological challenge for everybody. The sailors had to walk around with socks on in case any noise would set off a noise-activated mine that we knew the Iraqis had. And we got there, we circled USS Princeton. The ship's captain actually sent over a couple of cases of beer, and the U.S. commander was very grateful. He told all his U.S. ships, next time you want to send me sympathy, why don't you send beer like the Canadians? So it was a job well done, and we got Princeton out of there and to safety in Bahrain. So that was, I suppose, a highlight. Part of a highlight on that trip as well, we were far away from home, and in October, one of the newscasts interviewed one of the sailors who said, it'd be kind of nice to things to remind us of home, like maybe pumpkins or, it's Halloween coming up. And Howard Dill saw that broadcast in Halifax, and he grows the largest pumpkins in the world, or he grew. He's unfortunately deceased. And he called the admiral up and he said, I got this 350-pound pumpkin I want to send to the ships in the Gulf. And the admiral said, okay. So they crated it all up. They put it in a Hercules. They sent a 350-pound pumpkin, which we picked up in Bahrain. And the cooks actually put Canada as the mouth and 2 maple leaves as the eyes. And the air officer said, we should fly this around their ships in the Gulf. And I said, you crazy? They're all missile ships. They're ready to fire at anything. I said, but if you got a training mission, sure, go ahead and put that pumpkin in the back of the helicopter and give me about half an hour to let all the ships know that this is what's going to happen. And please don't shoot the great pumpkin down. And so it went off and it sailed around the Spanish ship, the U.S. ships, the French ship, the Dutch ship, the Danish ship. And all I got back was, you Canadians are crazy. You were crazy in the First World War. You're crazy in the Second World War. You're still crazy. Don't ever change.
Oh, that's amazing.
So that's my pumpkin story, which I just enjoy telling.
This is an interesting one, considering your role that you've played in procurement and in fashioning the future of military hardware acquisition with the way in regards to the frigates and the vessels that you were a part of. Could you comment on the current state of the Canadian defense environment and why it's important for the nation to maintain a strong defensive posture?
Well, I think I'll answer the second part of that because, we need a strong defense posture. I think history has proven that you have to sometimes fight for what you believe in. And to fight for what you believe in, you need a military. And the stronger it is, the more of a voice you have internationally. And I look at what has happened in the Ukraine and Russia invading Ukraine, and that's a war. I think the next step is for, just as they did in the Persian Gulf War, a collaboration of like-minded nations to send troops into Ukraine to help them out. That's the next step here, unless Russia starts withdrawing. We have got back into a bit of peacekeeping and peace and war prevention. Right now, we have 3,400 troops in Latvia to prevent Russia from doing the same thing to Latvia that they're still doing after 3 years in Ukraine. So is it necessary for us to have a strong defense posture? Absolutely. I think internationally we are renowned as a small but extremely efficient and very professional military force, and we always have been, and I'm sure that we always should be, because that's how we make our mark in the world. That's how we tell people, look, we have the best country in the world, and you should be looking to us to emanate the same kind of things we believe in human rights and in treating everybody equally and in enjoying a peacetime situation. But it comes at a cost.
Yeah, that's absolutely well said, and I'm glad you made that point. Dusty, thank you for your service. Thank you for everything you've done. And thank you for taking the time to come on and chat with us. It was an absolute pleasure today.
No, you're welcome, and thank you for interviewing me. What the heck? I don't get to speak about what I am or who I was very frequently.
So. Well, I'm never going to forget the pumpkin story. I'll tell you that.
And for all those men and women who were with me in the Persian Gulf, I couldn't thank them enough. They were very professional, and we got back in one piece because of all of them. They were remarkable. So I would say to any young person today, they should join the military. It's exciting. It's doing what you believe in, and it's pretty well paid at the moment. So go for it.
Thank you, Dusty. I appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
That's all for today. If you want to learn more about the CDA Institute, follow us on social media, visit our website at cdainstitute.ca, or subscribe to our newsletter for the latest updates on Canadian defense and international security. If you have comments or feedback about what you heard in today's edition, email our hardworking director Josh at cdainstitute.ca. I'm David Boris. Until next time.